Concorde was a fantastic aircraft to fly. Well do I remember, even after 10 years of flying Concorde, the thrill that one had at the announcement at the start of the runway, 3, 2, 1, now, and swiftly the throttles would be advanced and Concorde would leave the threshold and commence her run down the runway. The acceleration ever gathering pace, 100 knots, power checks, V1, rotate, a smooth drawback of the flying control column, 13 degrees, theta 2, the attitude, the acceleration continuing, and then once 250 knots was approached, pitching up in order to maintain 250 knots and increasing the angle of climb, and then 3, 2, 1, noise, and the flight engineer would switch off the reheats, bring the throttles back to a preset bug, the attitude of the aircraft would be reduced, and we would creep over the noise-sensitive area as quietly as a mouse. Thereafter, gradually as we climbed, increasing the thrust, increasing the speed, and making our way down towards the Bristol Channel, supersonic flight, threshold of space, arriving in New York before we'd left London, 10:30 departure from London maybe, and 9:30 arrival into New York, and in the opposite direction, having grown younger flying to the west, if you fly to the east in Concorde, whilst airborne and travelling with the spin of the earth, you actually lose weight, thereby justifying the superb cuisine. Mind you, as soon as you're static again on the ground, that particular effect is lost. It was an extraordinary aircraft to fly, and it's a great tragedy that there is no immediate successor. Peter Baker carried out test flights on Concorde, including the flying of Delta Golf.
Concorde, in fact, is very straightforward to fly. It's a funny shape, and if it wasn't stabilised in all axes as it is, if you had fly it in that condition, it's not so easy to fly. But with all the stabilisation devices working, it's a very reasonable airplane to fly. I think we're very proud of the fact we made it an extremely flyable airplane. It's very nice. It has electrical signalling, which the advantage of that is that any movement you make instantaneously is transmitted to the control surface, whereas conventional airplanes, even ones with power controls like hydraulics, there's always a tendency for a lag because you've got a big control run. But a wire isn't a control run. It doesn't have any friction in it, so it's instantaneous. So that's the other big advantage. What you do up the front happens down the back instantaneously, which makes it very nice to fly, and you can fly it very accurately.
On Tuesday, 25th of July 2000, the first and only fatal accident involving Concorde occurred with Concorde 203 Sierra Charlie. Outbound from Paris to New York, it crashed 60 seconds after takeoff, having suffered a tire blowout that caused a fuel tank to rupture. This started a sequence of events that caused a fire, which eventually led to 2 engines failing and the aircraft crashing. All 109 people on board were killed. 4 people in a local hotel on the ground were also killed. I can remember leaving Farnborough, the air show was on that particular day, and my mobile phone rang and my daughter was calling me and she announced a Concorde has crashed. My initial thoughts were, where, whose, and was it fatal? Air France, and it was fatal. And I wondered, having had a good safety record, whether that might not be the end of supersonic flight. BA's engineering manager, Paul Caswell, believes it wasn't the crash which led to the end of supersonic passenger travel, but another significant factor.
It was nothing to do with the Air France crash. September 11 killed it. Out of the top 50 corporations that used to use the aircraft, only 4 were left. Mainly the people that flew this were the businessmen, and it was the companies, the top sort of 100 companies used to use it a lot. About that 100, 50 of them would use it more than any of the others. And after September 11th, only 4 of them were left. So, you know, the companies were just folding, or the other companies were just saying, well, look, we've got to tighten our purse strings. Instead of flying Concorde now, you fly on a 747 and you go club class. Our biggest problem with any of the modifications, was the fuel tank liners after the crash. I mean, that was a mandatory mod that we had to do. There was no shortage of volunteers. That's probably a pun, no shortage of volunteers, because it was short people that used to get in the tanks. It's an old aircraft in years. It's a relatively young aircraft in flying hours. It was so quick, 3.5 hours to New York, under 3 hours coming back. The aircraft's always taken a lot of labour. It was so labour intensive. It was unreal. It was like a sports car. It's like trying to service a Mondeo against a Ferrari. It's always harder to service a Ferrari than it is a Mondeo, because everything is custom built. And Concorde's no different. It was a very labour intensive aircraft. So handling costs on it were huge, but in its heyday it was making a lot of money. In the end it just wasn't making money, so in the next 4 years we'd have had to have done a life extension program on there, which is a reskinning of the entire crown of the aircraft, and we just weren't getting the revenue coming in to afford to do it. I'm just glad to see it back home.
The engineering team from Air Salvage International, who dismantled Delta Gulf, will return to Brooklands in the autumn to start rebuilding the aircraft after work on Alpha Alpha is complete at the Scottish Museum of Flight at East Fortune. There is still much to do before that. Over the summer months, the museum's fundraising campaign, that will fund the restoration project, will step up a gear. By the end of 2005, the rebuilding of Delta Gulf and her restoration will be visible to the public at Brooklands, where museum visitors will be able to experience firsthand this British production Concorde.